Working memory is a specific type of short-term memory that processes language and perception in the brain. Specifically, this memory allows us to manipulate objects, items, and numbers in our brain to perform complex tasks. So working memory is one of the three main executive functions that help people organize tasks, regulate their emotions, and pay attention in the moment. If you're a fan of meditation or mindfulness, working memory is crucial to these activities or state of mind. To better show what working memory is, I'm going to give you a short example. In a TED Talk, Peter Doolittle asked audience members to memorize a set of 5 words. He then gives the audience a multiplication problem and some other simple tasks to complete. If the audience could remember the 5 words after those simple tasks, they could congratulate themselves for a high working memory capacity. And if you finish watching this video, I'm going to give you a simple test too. Once we decide to draw our attention to a sensory input, like something we feel or something we see, it then goes into our central executive memory. Now this is the manager of the operations that working memory completes. The central executive memory system delegates tasks to 3 simple systems. It decides what input is most important, what parts of the working memory system will handle the information, and what ends up continuing the process into long-term memory. So before I continue, psychologists know the basics of what central executive memory does, but the process in which it is done isn't so clear. For example, you might know that a car can drive down the road, but you don't know exactly how the engine works. Working memory is similar in this fashion, and it's split up into 3 main parts. These areas include the phonological loop, the episodic buffer, and the visual spatial sketchpad. First off, let's get to the phonological loop. So the phonological loop handles all of the auditory information. Within this loop are the areas of the brain that process what we hear and rehearse what we are going to say. When people are asked to memorize a phone number or a set of words, the phonological loop is put in charge. And it's called a loop because if the loop is too long, you can't start the process over. For example, try to remember these numbers. 56273. You can say them in your head over and over. 56273, 56273. Now, close your eyes and try to say those 5 numbers again. You probably did it, right? Now, try to remember these numbers. 5627328158924. You can't remember that, can you? That's because it's too long to fit inside of the phonological loop. By the time you get to the very first 8, you've already forgotten the first number. And something else that's interesting about the phonological loop is that it's not about the numbers. It's about the length of time in which you can say those numbers. Some psychologists cut it off at 2 seconds. And it's very important to remember that not all languages are actually perfectly efficient. For example, in some languages, it could take you 2 seconds to say 5 digits, while in other languages, you could say a whole 10 digits in 2 seconds. It's also important to note that the phonological loop can also hold visual information like pictures that is then turned into semantic information like words. For example, if you see a sign that says slow down turtles ahead, you can turn that visual information into auditory information by saying the phrase in your head. Now let's move on to the second part of working memory, which is a visual spatial sketchpad. So now we know what's in charge of what we hear, but what about what we actually see? The images that we take in and create in our mind are all handled by the visual spatial sketchpad. So try to think of a map from your house to your best friend's house. You're probably seeing a top-down map with a line across each one of the roads to get there. This place in your brain is called the visual spatial sketchpad. Colors, shapes, even haptic feedback are all information that is stored in our so-called mind's doodle book. And the visual spatial sketchpad is pretty simple. Let's move on to number 3, the episodic buffer. So we've got numbers and words in the phonological loop, and we've got pictures and images in our visual spatial sketchpad. But how do we connect these two? Well, according to this theory, we use a third part of our working memory called the episodic buffer. The episodic buffer is the area of your brain that adds the soundtracks to the visuals and subtitles, so to say. Like a movie, it puts together visual and auditory information and adds a sense of timing and organization. So just like single words can make sense alone, you need to put them together to convey even more information. Some psychologists say the episodic buffer also integrates time into each.